Hi there and welcome to this tutorial for Fastlane Digital Audio School down in Montpellier, France, an Ableton Certified Training Center. Today I'm going to present to you our dynamic EQ, the dynamic EQ we've made with the students in the class to palliate to the lack of that kind of tool in Ableton Live. Now Ableton Live offers a vast array of great high-end mixing tools, but we haven't got any dynamic EQ on board. However, we could make a very powerful dynamic EQ using only the native tools within Ableton. Unlike a traditional EQ, a dynamic EQ will only affect the signal when needed and accordingly to the energy present in the signal. So it's an extremely useful tool to control certain frequencies at certain moment in the signal, and it won't affect the rest of the signal. That's exactly what we're hearing right there with the cello bass area there. Let me solo that track. So we don't have any problem with the first notes. However, these two notes here are highly resonant, and I'd like to really control them, turn them down a notch to level up the energy throughout the performance. So I'm going to switch on our dynamic EQ here. Look and listen to the result. And you can see here, the EQ8 here reacts a lot more when these two notes are actually playing and just a tiny bit when they're not playing. So that's what I mean by dynamic EQ. It's reacting to the energy present in the signal. So I've made an audio effect rack you can download directly in the description down below, but I'm going to give you a tour of that rack so you know how to use it right away. First thing you'd want to do here is pinpoint the area, the frequency you'd like to affect. So if you turn this macro all the way left, what you hear now is the detection circuit. That's it. Using the frequency dial here, you can search for the right area of frequency. So you can hear, when I find the frequency, I actually put it really forward. It's over resonating, but that's what you want. Don't worry, you won't hear that resonance in the signal. That's just a detection circuit we need to trigger the actual EQ. So now that I found the frequency range I'd like to pinpoint, I'm going to turn that back to normal here so I can hear the normal signal, not the detection circuit. I can set up the Q here, which is the wideness or the narrowness, if you may, of the actual cut here. You see it's getting narrower when I raise this button here, so I can really pinpoint precisely the frequency area I'd like to affect, okay? The gain here is the position of the EQ at rest position. So if I turn that down, you'll find that the EQ doesn't really go back all the way up. At 50%, it stays flat. When I go higher up, you see at rest position, it's actually boosting here. That's also extremely useful. So I'm going to put it at rest at 0. Right there. Now the ratio is your actual cut or boost. Below 50%, you're cutting the signal. And you see, as I raise this, it's cutting less and less. If I go above 50%, look, it's now going to boost instead of cut. And that's also something you'd like to do sometimes. In this instance, I'd like to cut it like that. Now the release time is the time it will take for the EQ to go back to its rest position. And you see now it's really lazy. It's really taking a long time to go back up. And when I bring that down, this is going back up quite quickly now, okay? Now the sensitivity here lets you set how much the EQ actually reacts to the signal. If I put it back up here, see it's actually reacting a lot more to the frequencies I'd like to nudge. If I bring it down, you see, it's just going to move a little bit. Now, it's the strength of the cut, if you may. That also is important to set properly. Now, that's well and good, but I'd like you guys to understand the underlying principles behind this technology. So I'm going to undo this rack, take it away, and create one for you and show you how this was made using only Ableton Live's onboard effects. I'm going to go over to the Audio Effect tab and grab an EQ8. I'm going to load that onto the track and I'm going to rack it, to group it if you may, using Command G or Control G on a PC. Now my EQ is inside a rack. Here I can open up the macros and here I can open up the chains of the rack. So I'm going to now duplicate the chain using Command D or Control D on a PC to get twice the same chain, both bearing an EQ8. That's the detection channel. And this is the dry channel. So I'm going to switch that dry channel off just for now. So I'm going to use this first EQ to detect the signal to basically trigger the other EQA. So the first filter here is going to be set up as a high pass filter. And the fourth filter here is going to be set up as a low pass filter. You see I'm using the really steep slope time forward as 48 dB per octave. Now using these two filters, I can create a really narrow band pass here, and I can even boost it a little bit. And that's basically our detection circuit. Let's play this now. Yeah, that's what we were hearing when I turned that detection button all the way left earlier on. You see, and that's how I'm going to detect, basically pinpoint to live what frequencies are the problematic frequencies, okay? Now this signal is going to trigger an envelope follower. I'm going to bring that and load it right behind the EQ8 within the same chain. And now you see envelope follower is a great Max for Live tool that's now integrated within the audio effects in Live, just like any other effects basically. And you can see that this guy reacts and creates a graph using the intensity, the volume of the signal it's receiving. Now, since I'm pinpointing certain area of the frequencies, it's reacting, you can see, a lot more to these frequencies, okay? So that's what I'm going to use. That's the movement I'm going to use to basically trigger the other EQ. So I'm going to hit the map button and go over to the dry channel and affect that to the gain. Now that way you can see now the gain is actually reacting to the frequencies detected over here. Now using all the different settings here, I can really set it up the way I like it. So I'm not going to redo all the macros for you here. You do understand the principle now, I guess, yeah? You can see as I'm changing here different aspects of the envelope follower, I'm changing basically the behavior of this EQ here, and that's basically how we did it. Now it's a little bit more complex than that. We've set the macros properly so you can use it, but basically there you get the underlying technique and idea we had behind creating that tool. So we can use a dynamic EQ, as I said, to basically control, boost or cut certain frequencies at certain moment of the track. We can do many other things using that tool. We can basically create a really good deesser. Deessing is needed on voices, on Vox usually, where sibilances like S, T's and F's are a little bit too present in the signal and we need to basically deal with them. So deessers could be compressors, but in this case we can do a really good deesser using a dynamic EQ. So here we have a vocal.
C'est pas ta faute.
And on the first word, basically, we already have a Hess here. Let's pinpoint this one up. Let's just loop that down. See the first word. C'est pas ta faute. That's an annoying little frequency here. So basically, I've loaded my dynamic EQ here onto the track. I'm going to turn it on, and look what's happening now.
C'est pas ta faute.
See? When the S happens, this EQ turns it right down. And once again, I can set this all up with my macro to really customize it to my needs right now. Let's take another sentence. I know she's doing a really, really harsh sibilance right there, I think.
Imbécile ou bien heureux, allume la télé, il est temps de faire un vœu. C'est ça le secret.
There it is, yeah. So let's just loop this around. And once again,
c'est ça le secret.
Without the deesser, listen.
C'est ça le secret,
really
tu dormiras vraiment mieux. C'est ça le secret, tu
So once again, I can set it all up. I can narrow the cut. I can pinpoint the exact frequencies. I can detect the frequencies. I can even boost afterwards. You see, I can boost when I'm not actually cutting, you see, using a shelving here.
C'est ça le secret, tu dormiras vraiment.
You see, I can add some air to the vocals, but really turn down the S's when they do happen. Now let's use our dynamic EQ in one last example, one last scenario here. Imagine you guys have a breakbeat, a drum pattern where you don't have access to the individual elements. They're all already mixed in an audio file. Using our two-band dynamic EQ we created here, we can really do something important here. We can boost, you see, the bass when the kick does happen, and at the same time I can turn down the high frequency content when the kick does happen. Listen to this breakbeat without our dynamic EQ. Yeah, it's a lot darker, duller, and the kick doesn't really pulse through. Listen now. So not only I'm bringing the kick forward when it does play, but I'm also, you see, boosting the high frequency content when the kick does not play. And the high frequency content turns itself down when the kick does play. Look. That's amazing. And that's only using Ableton Onboard's effects. So that's what I really love about live. We haven't got a function, a button, or menu to do every little thing we need to do. We have an open system. Using the tools within that system, we can always find a solution to our problems. You just have to think out of the box.